So, hi everyone. Welcome to the first Democracy Project event of this academic year. We are
Juliet Hooker from Political Science.
and Bonnie Honig from Modern Culture Media and Political Science. We are the Democracy Project's founding directors, along with Melvin Rogers, who will introduce our guest speaker shortly. But first, we wanted to briefly share some of the work that we're doing at the Democracy Project.
The Democracy Project is dedicated to the interrogation at Brown and beyond of the politics and conditions of equality in democratic settings and to thinking about how to defend and expand democratic ways of life, character, and institutions in these very difficult times.
Democracy is struggling in old and new ways at this moment. One of the goals of the Democracy Project is to create collective spaces of reflection and action for those who want to make our political communities more truly inclusive, fair, and just.
In the last year, we've seen Supreme Court decisions and new legislative policies that limit what can be taught in schools and circumscribe how universities are allowed to build their student bodies. Universities are thus have a key role to play in the fate of democracy.
Our events this year are therefore grouped around the theme of citizenship and the university. You can find more information about other events we've planned throughout the year on the website, and there's also with the program a piece of paper listing them. We look forward to seeing you there. We want to mention that we're supported by the PPE Center's Ali Laughlin and Jacqueline Jutras in all the planning and programming that we do, including for today's event, so thank you.
As a distinguished academic and prominent public intellectual, our speaker today, Melissa Harris Perry, is the perfect person to kick off this year of programming on citizenship and the university. We are thrilled to have her here, and to formally introduce her, we turn now to Melvin Rogers.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I apologize that this big screen is in the way. But thank you all. We were with Melissa earlier today for lunch with some graduate students, a good number of graduate students, and she was sharing and talking about her experiences as an academic, as a public intellectual. And one of the things that was quite impressive about that session was not only, and most certainly, her brilliance, but more significantly, her vulnerability as she was talking with the graduate students about her amazing journey to date. So I just want to thank her for being available in that way. Let me also thank my colleagues, Juliet and Bonnie, and their wonderful leadership as we continue to imagine together the Democracy Project, and of course, all of you for joining us. I am honored and delighted to introduce Melissa Harris Perry. It is rare, yet profoundly rewarding, to encounter an individual who seamlessly blends scholarly insights with broad public engagement. And Melissa blends these two together extremely well. Melissa is the Maya Angelou Presidential Chair at Wake Forest University. She has held past appointments at the University of Chicago, at Princeton University, and at Tulane University. Melissa was the final host and managing editor of The Takeaway, a daily and national public radio program and podcast which aired on over 300 public radio stations across the country. From 2012 to 2016, she hosted the groundbreaking television show Melissa Harris Perry on weekend mornings on the MSNBC and was awarded the Hillman Prize for broadcast journalism. I've always been struck as I have watched and listened to Melissa, and I've been struck because in her journalistic capacities, dissecting and grappling with the problems and possibilities of our political moment, she consistently performs what I can only gather she hopes to generate in us, a discerning mind, and a critical relationship to the forces that govern and at times that seem to dominate our lives. Her ability to articulate complex issues with both precision and accessibility has made her an indispensable public intellectual voice. Yet it is her scholarly corpus that undergirds these public interventions and motivates her. She is the author of Barberships, Bibles, and BET, Everyday Talk, and Black Political Thought, and Sister Citizen, Shame, Stereotypes, and Black Women in America. The first was published by Princeton University Press and the second by Yale University Press. And I want to linger for a moment on this latter text. At the heart of Sister Citizen is an extended meditation on citizenship, with Black women serving as the primary case study. Melissa scrutinizes how the state often explicitly disparages and disempowers Black women through the imposition of restrictive cultural narratives. And this practice, a practice of dehumanization, often comes in the form of attributing cultural and behavioral traits to Black women that then function as reasons for their exclusion, their oppression. In this work, she definitely argues that democratic politics extends beyond electoral engagement, although she acknowledges that that is very important. But for her, democratic politics includes the very fabric of social regard and recognition. As she succinctly puts it, and here I quote her now, loss of social standing is an ever-present threat for individuals whose social acceptance is based on behavioral traits rather than, and here it is, the unconditional human value. And again, citizenship is more than an individual exchange of freedoms of rights. It is also membership in a body politic, a nation, a community. To be deemed fair, a system must offer its citizens equal opportunities for public recognition. Her case study, as I said before, focused on Black women, but her lessons very clearly, her lessons are for a healthy democratic society. Her lessons for a healthy democratic society apply to us all. Melissa, we are so delighted to have you here and to journey with you as you continue to offer us lessons on what a just democratic society demands. Welcome.
So I'm going to use this because I'm a little short for being behind this. Let me start by saying thank you to Melvin. I talked with the graduate students earlier, and I was talking a bit about the end of one's academic career, which always ends ultimately the same way, kind of at best. It ends with your death, and you are an email to the campus, and no one on campus even remembers who you are. And so this was a little bit of a conversation about how to make and adjudicate our life decisions a bit about how much time and energy and labor we give to the academy. And that may be sort of the end, but somewhere in the beginning is all the hoops of graduate school, which is its own kind of gauntlet. But somewhere in the middle, if you get really lucky, you have colleagues who take the time to not just read your bio, but to write a really gracious and beautiful introduction that helps you to see your own work in a different way. And so I thank you so much for that, Melvin. Thank you. I also told the graduate students that I met with earlier today that I have 4,859 slides and 22 minutes or something, who knows. So I will do my best to get through as many things as possible. If I start to rush, you can always slow me down and I can go back, or you can take a note and then we can talk about it. I'll also say one of the other really nice things that sometimes happens in your academic career is that you happen to just sort of ride along for a little bit of your time with some brilliant graduate student who then writes some groundbreaking book and then says nice things about your stats class.
The way I learned statistics.
like, thank you for getting me through stats class. So that was really a surprising and lovely thing to find in your book. It is lovely to be here and be among friends and colleagues. And because Professor Rogers is a friend and colleague, he can ask me to do a thing which I typically don't do, which is to talk about some topic which just very much is not my work. And so here we go. We're going to muddle through this together a bit. All right. Always good to have an outline. I've been trying to impress upon my undergraduate students how much I want them to write the roadmap sentence, even though everyone hates writing the roadmap sentence. So I found myself 900 slides in and realized I hadn't written a roadmap. Maybe I should go back and do that. So you'll see versions of this over and over again. But I'm going to talk a bit about the idea of why college, and I'll talk about what it means to be in the margins, or I'll try to give us a formulation around in the margins. And then I'll talk about 3 resistance strategies. These are not prescriptive. These are descriptive and analytic. Flags, stairs, and folding chairs. It's really because it rhymes. Okay, here we go. So our first question, I hate the color is a little off. I really purposely used the color code of brown, brown, and brown, red, but I went and found the hex code. It's very exciting, okay, but that's what we think is going on here. So the first is I want to make a claim about why college. So let's just start here. Sorry, stats class. Please notice that the x-axis is not uniform. So this is a decade from 1960 to 1970. This is a decade from 1970 to 80, another decade from 80 to 90, and then it starts going in 2 years across, you see, right? So this is a steeper incline than is present in the image, right? Okay, stats 101, here we go. But you get the general idea, which is simply that at this point, right, high school graduation is almost ubiquitous, right? We have come to a point where completing the high school diploma is greater than 90%, right? And that is quite different than at the middle of the 20th century, right? Where fewer than half of Americans finished the high school diploma. And, right, so that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is that we have seen, right, also an increase, and a substantial and meaningful increase in the percentage of Americans, right, who have the undergraduate bachelor's degree. Again, if you look at 1960, so this would be the first sort of full generation that it has, and all of their parents and grandparents and great-grands, right, in the post-World War II moment, right, when we make the great national investment in human capital. And so it starts ticking up from being fewer than 1 in 10 to being over a third. And so that means if you were to divide this up by age, right, younger cohorts are more likely to have the BA. But still, having the bachelor's degree is still a minority experience, right? And I don't mean a racialized minority experience, I mean a numerical minority experience. And so I'm asking here, do you see a policy story, right? And I sort of gave it away, right? That the policy story is a public policy investment of the GI Bill, right? And of a purposeful sort of push into the undergraduate experience, all right? So let's just want to start there. So we know that when there's this opportunity, more Americans take it. And now we have a population where the BA is a more normal, and I mean this normal just in a statistical way. All right. And again, at the same time, also, this is a much shorter x-axis, right? So again, note the x-axis. So this is a very steep incline if you look at it as far back as 1960. So on the one hand, right, more people with degrees and more people with debt. No one's shocked. No one here is surprised or shocked. I always like to tell the story to my undergrads that the first time I cast a vote was for Bill Clinton. I still have a lot of feelings about that vote, but I voted for Bill Clinton because he said we'd get student loan relief. So, which tends to make my students a little nauseous, that it has been, because they don't even really remember that Bill Clinton was president, and yet that's how long I've really thought maybe this time, okay? And I'm still paying my student loans. So we know that it is, on the one hand, more folks, but also that there is a cost. So I bring these two things up because, all right, just basic cost-benefit analysis should tell us, well, if people are willing to pay this high price, we want to find out what they get for the price, right? So things get more expensive, but if I'm willing to buy it, it must be because I believe there is something valuable. And this is a lot of how this gets talked about. I did a little bit of editing. So this table spit out as financial benefits of a degree, and I did a little editing here, the financial correlates of a degree. Because in fact, right, I'm asking you to ask which direction is the causal arrow. All of these slides, by the way, are for Professor Woodley because she said nice things about my stats class. So look, on an annual basis, having the bachelor's degree is correlated with having higher income. And over the lifetime, it is correlated with millions more in income. Now, I am saying correlated with on purpose. Ideally, what we'd like to believe is you go to college, and as a result of going to college, then you earn a higher income. That would really help us to understand the cost-benefit analysis. How much am I going, what's my return on investment? But we don't actually know if that's true, because of course, people who go to college and people who finish college are not a random draw from the box of people, right? In fact, we have a lot of reason to believe that, we have a lot of reason to believe that the correlation is some other thing altogether. That those people who can afford college and can afford to finish college are already going to have higher incomes because they are already structurally positioned for those higher incomes. And that it is not that college is doing it, it's just that college is one of the things. Anybody know how to predict a presidential election with great certainty? And one variable. The tall guy wins. It is an extraordinarily powerful and parsimonious model. The tall guy wins. Turns out the tall guy even wins against the shorter woman. Like, we weren't really sure, right? It turns out even the tall black guy wins, right? And especially like Barack Obama and Joe Biden together were like the twin towers of candidates. Like, it was stunning how tall they were, like, put together, all right? Especially given that John McCain and Sarah Palin and their average height were quite smaller. But we don't think, because we'd have to wrap up American politics as a field, we don't think that it's causal, right? We think there must be something more interesting going on about why the tall guy wins. So it's a good predictive parsimonious model. If you finish up college, you'll have a lot more money. But we don't know if it's because you went to college or if it's because of some other thing, right? Tall guys get lots of benefits all the way through, and lots of people telling them you should run for president, which is why they run, and then that's why they win. Okay. But maybe, simply knowing it, also I like to say this if you're like in your senior year and you're like, should I really finish? Yes, right? Because I'll whip out this slide and I'll say, hey, look, for real, like everything tells us that just getting across the finish line makes a difference, right? And you don't even have to be at Brown. Just like get on across that finish line. It should make millions of dollars of difference in your life. At a minimum, it does seem that these data are telling us that the wage-based marketplace, right, values and rewards college degrees. Maybe it's because you learned something in college, maybe. Or maybe it's just a market signal, right? So maybe it just is that when you finish college, you can put your hand up and say, I'm in the club along with you. It's like the little blue passport, right? It's just the thing that allows you to move through the world with a certain level of privilege and capacity. So we don't know exactly why the wage marketplace rewards it, but we do know that it does. And to the extent that earning a higher income is the primary definition of success in college, well, it is clearly correlated with that. don't know that that is a full answer to the question, why college? I think it's important to start here because there are those who will deny that even this is true. So I just wanted to at least start there. It turns out, though, that not all little blue passports, not all membership signals, not all market signals are the same. The wage marketplace rewards a college education, but for Black students, and I'm just sticking with Black students for now, we can talk about why in a minute, but for Black students, the reward is substantially different if we're looking just at this fiscal question. We've switched now from wages to wealth, okay? This is important. We've switched now from wages to wealth, right? So we know that wealth is not just about, right, the wage marketplace and what you're being paid. Wealth is, remember, everything you have minus everything you owe. And yes, what you're seeing here is right. For Black households headed by someone with a college degree, wealth is lower than white households without a college degree. All right, one more time. So the light blue is college education. The dark blue is without college. So going to college has a net benefit for Black households. Yes, that is not to be denied. But the magnitude is so much smaller and race is so powerful that even for Black households with the college education, the wealth is expected to be below that of white households without the college education. Could be that it's because Black undergrads tend to complete undergraduate universities at less selective universities. Could be because they are trained and certified with different skills. This is the STEM argument, right? The Black students are less likely to be STEM majors and therefore to earn less. Could be because in order to go, they have to take out a lot more debt. So on the wealth side, right? Could be that it's because they earn less than their white counterparts, which we know to be true. And it could be that the market signal for race is more powerful than college education, especially around wealth. What's the number one basis for wealth among Americans? Where do most ordinary Americans have their wealth? Oh my God, someone screamed out stock market. No. I enjoy that? No, no. Where is it? Home, in your house, in your real estate, right? Okay, so turns out if you have, for example, an appraiser, happened to me literally last month, if you have an appraiser come to your house to appraise the value of your home, which is where most of your wealth are, even with your big fancy degrees stacked up on the wall as a reminder, hey, I'm in the Blue Passport Club, my friend, that your Blackness, your Black body, the pictures of your Black children all around the house have meaningful, measurable decline in the value of your home. An appraiser undervalue my home by basically 60%, like 2 months ago, and had to write all the letters, oh, sir, you don't want, let me tell you who I am. You really don't want to do this with me. Yeah, I was like, oh my God. I sent them a copy of my husband's lawsuit. I was like, so my husband is a civil rights lawyer and really you don't want to do this. But it could be that race is the far more powerful market signal. All right. Maybe that means college is not worth it if you're on the margins, particularly on the racial margins. Maybe instead of taking that big loan and all that, just stop it. Because after all, you're not going to, it is better for you, particularly as a Black woman, to just go find a high school educated white boy and marry him, or a high school educated white girl and marry her. Not so much. Actually, really, you want the white boy for lots of reasons, relative to the economic question, the wealth question, than it is to invest all that money in a college education. Which is why we got to get out of assuming that the question of whether or not it's worth it is just about the money. So let me tell you a story. This is from Ebony Magazine, 1958, 59, summer of 59, 60, summer of 60, summer of 1960. It is a story about Richmond's genius twins, rugged football players who are also tops in scholarship. Richmond, Virginia at this time is segregated, Jim Crow. This is a story about twins who are attending Armstrong High School. As you can see, it is an all-black space. I love these images, in part because they're just, everyone is dressed so well for school. The senior class is called to order by William in an after-school session. Talks about how he has a slight lisp, but he picked up confidence during the summer at North Carolina College, which is now North Carolina Central, and he always makes excellent presentations when giving reports. The story goes on to talk about their mother, Mrs. Rosa Harris, who is a seamstress with chronic arthritis, who earned $35 a week doing home sewing and making slipcovers. She was also a genius. She could make a wedding dress without a pattern by somebody just bringing in a picture. I know that because Mrs. Rosa Harris is my grandmother. And William, making this excellent presentation, is my dad. And Wesley, his twin brother, is my Uncle Wes. In this story, it talks about how the boys, Wes and William, went to a summer program, and how Rosa Harris knew that they weren't going to work that summer, they weren't going to earn an income, and so there wouldn't be money to buy coal. So my grandmother, who was a seamstress with chronic arthritis, was going to be cold all winter so that her boys could go to this program, so that they could go to college and be the first in their families to attend. Both went to college, both got PhDs, both became college professors. My dad becoming the first dean of African American Affairs at the University of Virginia, my uncle becoming the head of aeronautical engineering at MIT. Both are truly insufferable to this day. All of us in the family have a copy of this. We've always thought of ourselves as like the children of the twins. But for me, the story is the story of Rosa Harris. I think of myself as sacrificing things for my children. Getting home early, doing these things, right? We talked about this earlier, right? You're sacrificing. But I have never faced being cold in the winter, all winter, so that my kids could learn. I do not believe that that was about money. I do not believe that my grandmother wanted to send those boys to college so that they could be rich. I don't. Their father owned a restaurant. This was Jim Crow Richmond. There were lots of ways for them to earn income, and certainly a lot more pressing ways to earn income in that moment. She did without money in order to send them to college. I do not believe it was about wealth. It is because my grandmother was a genius. And so her boys were geniuses. And their brains needed the opportunity and the right and the capacity. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and, ooh, this one, the pursuit of happiness, the capacity for self-fulfillment, the notion of a full humanity that is not exclusively about labor. For me, college cannot just be about income. I mean, God bless income, and feel free to make some, and heck, stack up some cash and some wealth and all the things. But I don't think that's why she was willing to be cold in the winter. And I don't think that it is enough for us to explain or understand the democratic value of college education through how much money we earn. Professor Melvin Rogers asks this question that I have been pondering since reading it. What is it about democracy that justifies our faith, especially African Americans' faith in it? Now, he got me here because the faith question is a big one for me. And trained as an empirical social scientist, I mean, I don't have faith if it's not like, 2 standard deviations. That's how I know that I should have faith in it, because I can see right there that it is true. And that's where I tend to lean. I know this is true because I can see it, I can touch it, I can feel it, I can measure it, I can replicate it. The problem is that I come from these Black folks who were enslaved in the US South. And the problem with an empirically based, evidentiary approach is that, well, they weren't in contact with much evidence that they were human. How is it that knowing nothing but intergenerational chattel bondage, having experienced nothing but intergenerational chattel bondage, expecting nothing but intergenerational chattel bondage for your children, do you think that there's a God, that God knows you, that God has regard for you, that you are fully human? Every time I hear someone say, you can't be it if you can't see it, I just laugh. What could you possibly mean that you can't be it if you don't see it? I would not exist. So for me, I actually went back to seminary because it was such a puzzle. What does it mean to have faith in a thing? To believe that I exist, to believe that I am human, to believe that I matter. I mean, my people got up out of slavery and then were like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna run for office. What? I'm gonna find my people, I'm gonna find my children, I'm gonna look for my spouse, and then, you know what I think I'll do? I think I'll vote. What? Why? 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 I mean, I want to know, what is it about democracy that justifies our faith, especially African Americans' faith in it? So I just took Professor Rogers' really fascinating question and I tweaked it. What is it about college that justifies our faith, especially the faith of the marginalized in it? Why? Why would you be cold to send your kid to college? Why would you take out them damn loans to send them kids to college? I'm sorry, we've been talking about her 4 children and the loans. Why would I take out the loans to send, why would I never go get a real job? I have a fair number of skills. I mean, I'm a little quirky, but I probably could have gotten a real job in the world, but nope. I wanted to stay in college. Like literally, I'm 50, haven't left. Why? What is it that justifies our faith in it? So I just want to suggest that opportunity is not exclusively about earning. And I just want you to kind of ask yourself, to think for yourself about what your college education means, not only to you, but to your people, whoever those people are, however that is defined. Why do we do it? Why are we willing to make sacrifices to attain it? And I'll also say, even if it's self-interest misunderstood, one of the things about behavioralism in American politics is like, well, even if people are wrong, you got to take it as it is. If people want to vote for Trump, then that is what they want to do. Or, my goodness, if they want to vote for Bill Clinton, well, then you got to start from there. So if people want to go to college, if they actually want it and are willing to make sacrifices for it, we have to begin there, that there is a value that is actually conferred to it by the wanting. This is a little bit of the marketplace. Okay, pause, because I told the students earlier, I kept going down these rabbit holes. So I just want to remind you where we were going. Right, so we just did a little bit of why college. Now I'm going to move real fast. I'm going to do in the margins. think the question for me of in the margins is this question of to whom does college belong? If my mother, who is 80, and in her graduate school years helped to run an underground operation to bring women to the state of Washington to have abortions before Roe v. Wade. And she has a certain kind of agony about where we are with reproductive rights in this country that is distinct from my agony around it, right? Because she thinks, how could I have done all this? And here we are again. I feel that a bit around the affirmative action decision. Not completely, but a bit. Like, I had this conversation in 1989. I had this conversation in 1990. How are we still having this conversation? I have not, for example, written or spoken at all about the affirmative action decision because I feel a little bit like, I mean, didn't we already do this? But the thing I want to zoom in on is simply one piece. This notion of qualified and the rhetorical, ideological, interpersonal pretzels we put ourselves in around the notion of who is qualified for or deserves to be on college campuses. And I want to ask, what does the public discussion of affirmative action reveal about what we think college is and who it's for and what it does? I probably didn't have an appreciation of this in the 80s and the 90s because I was young. Now that I have a college senior, I have to say, no one deserves to go to college. 18-year-olds haven't done shit. So I'm going to say that one more time. I don't care how smart you are, how great you are, how many clubs you were in, how many A's you got. So what? That sounds like you have great freaking parents. And maybe a great genius grandmama in the back, and maybe a really great community, but what have you, and some 18-year-olds have really overcome a whole lot of shit. Some 18-year-olds have managed to come through foster care and have managed to come through poverty, and still, what would that have to do with deserving to be in college? And what the hell do we think that college is? A reward? A little, I mean, this I did not know until I taught at Princeton, that you could totally fail out of like your local state university, but you cannot fail once you get to a certain level. Like when I got to, I was like, oh, you just gotta get in. Cool, because you will be dragged, pushed, pulled, given a leave of absence, given some medical professionals, given an apple, given a moment to take a nap, given a chance to rest. Now that I got children who are in the little fancy independent private school system, I mean, try to fail. Just try to fail. You are not allowed because the world would be like, no, child, we will make sure you have what you need. I'm just telling you, going over to North Carolina Central University, miss 3 classes, you will just get a C-. Miss 5 classes, you will just get a D. Miss 6, they will fail you, bye. But we call these schools harder. Oh, Princeton's so hard. It's hard to get into, but shit, try to fail. So why do we treat it like it? Shouldn't college be like, all right, everybody over a certain bar? I mean, yes, there are certain things you have to be able to do, but then once you're over the bar, draw from the box. And then if we're really good at our job, no, look, y'all teach it the good stuff. So like I'm telling you, I teach at Wake Forest, we just dropped 20 some odd points in the rankings, and I am hype. I am beside myself with enthusiasm because let me tell you, students in the top 30 schools are annoying. But students in the top 50 are great because top 50 are like strivers. They're like, I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna read the books. I'm gonna come to class. Top 30 school, they're like, ha, I couldn't get into the Ivies, but I got in here, sucker. And now I'm not gonna read nothing. Now, that's not quite true about how bad they are, but boy, man, I am hyped to be back in the top 50 and out of the top 30. Now, I know y'all are like top 10 or whatever, because you're fancy schools. But there's lots of wonderful things about the fancy schools. Maybe the fancy schools should be a little bit harder to get into, and it is certainly harder to teach when there are not a certain set of skills. But the whole notion of qualification to get into school is sort of wildly inaccurate. They're 18. They can barely do laundry. So who deserves to be there? All right, so part of why it matters, right? When we say who deserves to be in these schools, remember, if you're gonna go work for Deloitte, I don't even know that you need college, whatever. But if you're gonna be a teacher, a lawyer, or a physician, you have to. So when we say who deserves to be here, we are in part asking who deserves to be represented in the classroom? Who deserves to be represented in the courtroom? Who deserves to be represented in their medical care? If students don't get in, they cannot get out, they cannot get past the gateway, full stop. So any notion of stopping that pipeline and making some 18-year-olds more qualified than some other 18-year-old. Now, if we're talking about different kinds of college, we're talking here about this was Chapel Hill and Harvard. This is 18 to 22-year-olds who got some cash, who did some organizations and got some grades and took some tests. Okay. I mean, you had to do more than that, and did you also bathe every day? Great. But I mean, why should some whole groups therefore get doctors, lawyers, and teachers and whole other groups do not? College matters in part because in democracy, in our current democracy, everybody up there, I also had to put this one up. I went to graduate school with his little brother. This is, of course, Hakeem Jeffries. I went to Duke getting my PhD in political science while Hassan Jeffries was getting his PhDs in history, and Hassan Jeffries, as the little brother of the man who is most likely going to be the first Black Speaker of the House, has a lot of feelings on Twitter. So I encourage you, if you do nothing else with your life, to, if you are on social media, follow Hassan Jeffries, especially if you enjoy brother rivalry, because on the one hand, he's very, very proud of him, and on the other hand, every time there's 15 votes for Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House, Hassan is I can't go home for Thanksgiving because mercy, all right? But Hassan, Hakeem, all of us, all of that is only possible because we went to college. You can't, it doesn't matter how you gerrymander the districts. If you stop the pipeline, you end the possibility of the political representation. It also fails to ask another question, which is, while we're asking who belongs on campus, we are failing to ask whether campuses even have a right to be where they are. Land-grant universities are actually land-grab universities. It's not as though they are just accidentally on these spaces. The federal government took indigenous land and handed it to state governments to build state universities. And then those universities raised hundreds of millions of dollars. To turn yourself into an ideological pretzel about whether or not an SAT score is a good or bad measure of readiness for college is to miss the much broader question about what a college is, why it matters, and where it is. Colleges don't owe some theoretical debt. They owe an actual, measurable, empirical debt. They exist institutionally.
This 16-year-old got accepted into Harvard and was around all of his classmates when he checked if he got in, and the reactions are amazing. His mom is a single mother who worked multiple...
Whoa, 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 whoa.
This-
Sorry.
This 16-year-old got accepted into Harvard and was around all of his classmates when he checked if he got in, and the reactions are amazing. His mom is a single mother who worked multiple jobs to be able to pay for his tuition. She said, "No matter what bills weren't getting paid or what lights were cut off, I knew I was coming home to good grades and kids who were striving in school. It was his dream as a kid to go to Harvard, and he made it a reality."
Anybody know the story about this video? There's a whole bunch of these viral videos, 2018, from this school in Louisiana. All these kids really did get into these schools. They also were going to, it was kind of the Landry family, and had founded this little independent private school that wasn't actually doing much around curriculum, but was helping all of the students to apply, and was writing these narratives of struggle that weren't always true. The idea that Harvard is more interested in you as a Black student if you are more on the struggle. I love Jemele Hill, but I would like to throttle her. Her notion that we should address the affirmative action debate by ending legacy admissions makes me know she doesn't have college-age children. Because ending legacy admissions, when we just got here, Black middle-class children do worse economically than their parents. They go to schools less selective than their parents. Ending legacy admissions would have a vastly negative effect on the Black middle class, which is hanging on by a frigging thread. First gen is not going to solve it. Remember, I just told you, my daddy, because his mother, my grandmother, was a genius seamstress, got my daddy to college in 1960. I'm not first gen, my kid is third gen. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be asking questions about equity. You cannot reduce race to income. And you cannot reduce Blackness in particular to first gen status. We've been here a long time, but we just got here. And all of that is about the story of American democracy. We talk about college campuses having safe spaces, and it's almost bizarre because college campuses have never been safe spaces. They have always been contested. It was colleges first before K through 12. It is college first in the moment of the Trump era. Almost done. The other solution is that it cannot simply be at HBCUs. Dixon v. Alabama, 1961, is the story of your rights as students right now, today, to not simply be kicked out of school for participating in a political rally like the one that's occurring outside right now, because these young people participated in the civil rights movement and were kicked out of their historically Black college because the state legislature told them that they had to kick these kids out. And so they took it all the way to the Supreme Court to ensure your rights to speak as a student. And it is a mistake to think of all of this struggle exclusively in terms of student access. Colleges are not just about the classroom. In fact, they're not even mostly about the classroom. Colleges are employers. Colleges are landowners. Colleges are investors. Colleges are healthcare providers. Colleges are contractors. Colleges are policing units. Colleges are political agents. Professor Baldwin's In the Shadow of the Ivory Tower from 2021 walks through how universities in their nonprofit status, buying up all the land around them, are starving to death the public schools. You know what nonprofits don't have to do? They don't have to pay property taxes. And so if your university, like mine, is the primary employer in town, and if it is the single largest landowner in town and it does not pay property taxes, and your public schools are funded by property taxes, then your university sending 4 little students out to do a little tutoring at the schools that it starved to death as it expands in a kind of settler colonialism way is not enough. And no matter who it's admitting, it isn't doing racial equity if all those kids in the schools that it's starving to death are black and brown, while it sits on indigenous land that was stolen and then buys up more land in a nonprofit way because it's nonprofit but not nonprofit. And if you wonder who belongs at colleges, you just got to look who can get in the door. And I don't just mean the admissions door. So what is it about college that justifies our faith? Okay, we're going fast now. Fast, fast. For me, it is that maybe, like the American Project in Democracy, there is a faith in this still nascent but truly worthy aspiration that maybe college, like democracy, has this possibility for freedom, for self-knowledge, and for recognition in public spheres. My chair of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Wake Forest is also a longtime friend and political scientist, Julia Jordan-Zachary, and she often says to me, "Girl, it's all right that we're in the margins. There's plenty good room in the margins. Don't you take all your good notes in the margins?" So this really is fast. What follows is not prescriptive. I'm not telling you to do these things. I'm telling you I see these things happening. Flags. Flags claim space. I needed a flag the other day. I lead a Girl Scout troop. My Girl Scout troop is very racially diverse. Took my little racially diverse Girl Scout troop hiking. I live in North Carolina. We got down to the hike and whoa, they had flags. I needed somebody to put a little flag on the website. Now I know what I have to do every time we decide where we're going to go hike or camp with my little racially diverse 9 and 10, 11, 12-year-olds. I'm going to need to look at something like, for example, the vote share to Trump in 2020 before I go on down. Because there was a big county fair happening, and I needed a flag. I needed a little green book for Girl Scouts. Don't take your babies down over to this county. So one of the things I love about the rainbow flag is I'm like, oh, cool, I can go to church there. Oh, I can eat there. The flag marks a space for me. It tells me it's all right to come on in. They can also be tools of resistance even when they are flags of domination. I love this story. This is Anthony Quinn. He's 5 years old. It's 1965. He has gone down in Macomb, Mississippi, and he is holding an American flag. And by holding an American flag, he has enraged this officer. This 5-year-old black boy holding the American flag, his laying of claim to citizenship enrages this officer. And his mother, in a third photo that you can't see, is kind of standing off, and she says to him, "Don't you let that man take your flag." I'm a black woman, feminist, who lives in the South, and I wear a cross because I will not let them take my flag. You might think the cross means something totally different, but I just go ahead. I rock my American flag. I rock my cross. I just do my little Christian nationalism all through the grocery store in this body with these ideas, with this, because you can't have it. You can't have my flag. You can't have my cross. I am not your refugee. I am a citizen. Yes, I will throw the canister back. He died by suicide 3 years after this. That ain't my flag. They can have that one. This is very bad art done on a plane while we were coming up, but I showed this because there are rules about how you can represent on college campuses the mascots. This is the Xavier of Ohio mascot. I just turned him black and gave him an afro. Because I go to both went to and teach at Wake Forest, and I want to make my deacon into a little black girl with an afro, and I can't. I'm not allowed. I'm literally not allowed to plant my flag on the deacon because there's rules about what it can look like. So planting a flag is a form of resistance. All right, and by the way, it's not all just visual. Sometimes it is the way we take up sonic space, and because I'm so far over time, I'm not going to click, but your own Professor Madison Moore, and the way that you can create a sonic, narrative, artistic resistance. When you hold the flag, when you don't let them take your flag, you say, it is mine, I belong here. All right, stairs. For me, stairs, all that I mean here is that they represent the inaccessibility of the built environment, and they remind us of the unspoken normative ways of moving through, teaching, learning, accessing, and they reinforce assumptions about the normal. Yes, we have accommodations. Secure your accommodations today. But accommodations presume there is some normal, and then we have to accommodate your non-normative self. This is not a critique of accommodations. For goodness sake, secure your accommodations. But I think it's more a question of why accommodation is necessary on campus. When we think about disability, I'm not going to go into this because I'm just way over time, but I do want us to be able to say that when we do race and disability together, the connections can be challenging because there are ways that racism disables, and that is something different than a disabled identity that is not about being disabled by oppression. Again, more books. Black Disability Politics talks about the possibility of this system where we can see the stairs and call out the stairs on our campuses using a disability framework as a way of engaging the work of resistance, which is why, rather than accommodation, we do the work of universal design. And so I want you to think about what would universal design be in the context of democracy. Almost there. Insisting on alternatives to stairs is a form of resistance because it disallows the existing structures to exist unquestioned. And it communicates that because I belong here, I have to be able to live and move and work and play, not place, in this space. All right, last one, folding chairs. All right, so y'all know Ms. Chisholm, Representative Chisholm, the first African-American, the first woman, and the first black woman in all of those ways to become a candidate for the US presidency, seeking the Democratic nomination. And she is frequently quoted as talking about, right, if they don't give you a seat at the table, then you bring a folding chair, right? And she recognizes that this is precarious. She recognizes that it's inequitable. She knows if everybody else is sitting in a good chair and you're bringing a folding chair, that it is an equity, but it is an insistence on agency, maybe not autonomy, but certainly agency. Girl, they ain't invite you, so what? Go. Plant your flag. Insist that the stairs be made accommodating. So this is how we thought about folding chairs until this summer. Because then came Montgomery, Alabama. And in Montgomery, Alabama, the folding chair was used differently. This was not, if they do not give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. This was, if they act a damn fool, bring you a folding chair. August 5th, 2023, unleashed this level of Black digital creative expression that I feel like was unseen. Like in 2008, we were all hype around Obama. We were making all the things, and it was much harder to make things in 2008. Like you didn't even have the AI. But the level, because what I'm not interested in here is the fight. I mean, the fight is the fight, right? Whatever. What I am interested in here is the politics of the response to the fight. I didn't know we were this mad. I really didn't. I mean, I knew I was mad. I didn't know we were all this, because the joy at the victory, the excitement, the memes, I mean, the genius of these memes were out in hours. People were like, boom. Oh no, where are they? They are not all there. Oh, I want to just pass out right now. My Harriet Tubman one is not there. And I've somehow, oh no. The whole back end of this did not update. Okay, this is when you're making your thing in the last hour. Okay, that's all right. We're gonna pause. So, we have done flags and stairs and folding chairs. And here's what I want to say around the folding chairs, that they are a form of resistance in two ways. They are both about the autonomy and the agency associated with pulling up the folding chair, and they are about this collective engagement in the joy of victory and recognition, the tossing of the hat, the idea that we see and hear each other, the idea that we swim across the canal to fight for one another. So these three pieces I want to give you as actions of resistance, not that I'm asking you to do them, but to see what is often happening on college campuses as either being about flags, presence, about stairs, a battle against existing structures, or about folding chairs, collective joy, creative agency to fight back with an actual goal for a win. Thank you. Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. So we have about 20 minutes. So we have mics here and mics here. So if you have any questions, feel free to go to the mic, and you'll take them.
And it can be about the talk, but it can also be about anything else. We are existing right now in a social and political moment. So. And I'm very sad that the final slides were not there.
That's okay. That was wonderful.
So do I have to get up?
No,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so first of all, I'm like crushed out on you. I want to say that I have admired you in your work for as long as MSNBC made the stupidest move ever, which was, to remove you. And then I was so sad when you came off the radio. So I just want to say, this was really interesting, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about the value of education as somebody that's a white, working class, first gen ethnic, Italian ethnic, and that I didn't really understand this until 2020, but that I was the first generation of college students that had access to African scholars of the diaspora that were scholar activists. Mm-hmm. And the Institute of the Black World and Vincent Harding and some folks, so it was very interesting to me. I also grew up in Boston during school desegregation, and I had the fortune of having adults that gave us information about the history of racial discrimination in public education. So I just want to say that I really appreciate the idea of value of education, because I have not made a whole lot of money. And what was so funny is that my working class friends had a custom-made briefcase, and I'm a friggin' activist, like so activist crazy, but I also raise money for good, like I reappropriate money legally. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you.
I don't even mind if you do it illegally.
Yeah, no, I do fundraising, and currently I work at a vocational technical high school, and I was just thinking about college education and who belongs and who doesn't. And just for me personally, I didn't think that I should go to college. I had the imposter voice. And it was actually a black scholar from UMass that said, Francis, because I got a full tuition scholarship to Hampshire College.
And you weren't gonna go?
No, I was leaving it. I only went because I wrote special education law. It was new, we just passed it. I wrote a guide to students, special education, and they hired me to go work in Springfield, and I got a full scholarship to Hampshire. I hated Hampshire. I'm no offense to brown and elite people, but rich people, especially rich white people, are
They're a lot.
some mean, stingy motherfuckers, and I didn't grow up with them. So I felt completely alienated, and I ran across to UMass, and the professor over there sent me back because he said, Francis, if you want to be a revolutionary, you gotta have access to power and money. And I'm gonna end by saying that this was really quite astounding, even though it took me 40 minutes. Brown has the worst signage ever for non-brown people, just to add that.
All universities do.
Yeah, I know, it's bad.
These are the stairs,
I mean,
yes.
that and like what kills me on public land is they say no trespassing. Like, really? No trespassing. But anyway, thank you so much. I admire you so much. My family, we love you, we listen to you, and you're just the bomb. So thank you.
So much of what you said, I mean, I just don't want to leave any of it because I just want to highlight a couple of the pieces, right? So you are giving the examples. To me, when you talk about everything from like, I had the scholarship, but I didn't want to go because who wants to go into that space? Those are the stairs, right? So I'm allowed to go to campus, but I can't come into this room because of the stairs, right? So all of the ways that we perform intellect and all the ways that we perform college, right, end up pushing out. But then it's not just performance, it's also genuinely the actual physical space. So we build our spaces to learn in ways that ensure that outsiders, by which we mean the community, right? Like all of the young people who are cycling through every street, right, can't figure out how to park, where to park, what buildings, right, lack of, all of these things are literally stairs, right, to our campus. And they affect not only admitted students, they affect faculty, they affect staff, they affect the children of staff, right, who don't see the campus belonging to them, right? All of these, the fact that we fire food service workers in the summer, so we are non-unionized in North Carolina, and so Sodexo and Aramark, and we contract with them, and then they fire them in the summertime, and like, again, we're sending out students, undergraduate students, to tutor while creating learning loss for the children of the people who work for us, right? So, and then saying that it is necessary in order to preserve the exclusiveness of university. And so part of what you've given us is the clarity about, because I'm just sort of talking these big ideas, but like the clarity about how those ideas manifest. And I also appreciate that, yeah, like there comes a point, I have a sister who just retired, and I mean, she's, you know.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing about affirmative action.
Oh, yeah.
Like as a white working class first gen person, and just like, I'm 64 years old, every opportunity that I had was because the blood and sweat and tears of black people, black American people, black people from the African diaspora. Every single thing. And I think that is something that the younger generation really needs to understand about the legacy of oppression and freedom that black Americans have waged for all of us. And I am a testimony to that because, you know, in the workplace, at university, if it hadn't been for what black folks did, and so the whole issue of affirmative action, you know, it's just like you know, I mean, I was the affirmative action officer for a town in Weymouth outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Everybody that I judged before I came on board were people that knew people in government. I actually created job descriptions and a hiring process.
Imagine.
There were no black people then there, but guess what? Everybody that wasn't connected to the selectmen and the parks department. So I tell those stories over and over again so that people understand that public policy that black people fought for, we have almost every single thing from equal wages and fair wages and child labor laws, which would have happened longer if we weren't so stupid and racist. But anyway, Again, thank you. I was blessed to have James Baldwin and Audrey Lord be visiting professors, and Audrey was my, she saved me from drinking in the middle of the park one day.
That's kind of, you were like, oh yeah, and also.
So I'm 18 to 21 years old, a working class girl from outside Boston, exposed to these people, and it wasn't until 2020 when I looked at my box and reflected and realized, wow, this is what formed the foundation of you.
Yeah.
So Melissa, let me, if I can get in here on this
Yep.
affirmative action point, thank you for that. If I could, 'cause you don't want to talk, like,
Yep.
we've been here before, but reflect just a bit on the sort of the way in which this question of affirmative action and access and the decision from the Supreme Court, right, it sort of turns on the very idea of equality, right, that Black folks and brown folks have historically used for inclusion, right? And of course, it turns on this discussion of equality quite independent of the historical tale about the persistence of inequity,
Yep.
right? And so it gives the impression that really we're all on the same playing field, and now to sort of assert the affirmative posture of universities
Yep.
with respect to diversity is now to reinsert inequity rather than responding to this sort of historical problem for which it was created. So reflect on how it is that in our sort of public discourse, we don't seem to have the requisite agility to mark those differences.
Part of it is the law, right? Just the problem of the thing that is the law. So the notion that we are having the conversation about affirmative action on a battlefield of diversity is itself a problem, right? So we end up having the conversation about diversity because diversity is all that's left of the law by the time we get to this decision, right? So affirmative action really should not be about diversity per se. It's just that was the legal leg that was left. Oh, it's okay to consider race in admissions because there is an academic value to a diverse classroom, right? So a few things we know about that. One, the primary value of a diverse classroom is value that attains to whom? To white kids, right? So we know this from K through 12 all the way through, is that actually students of color and girl and women and femme students actually, regardless of race, actually tend to do better in a bunch of ways in equally resourced solo spaces. When a highly diverse space benefits particularly white students. This is in part because Black people already live in white world, even if they're not in white class, right? Like we definitely know what products you use on your hair. Like, I mean, we don't have to have a white roommate to find out, but often white roommates have to have a Black roommate to find out, right? Like, it's just, this is the asymmetry. So part of it, I would say, is the problem of the law itself. So when you end up with diversity as opposed, or inclusion or equity, any of that language, as opposed to a reparative action, right? So this is part of why, so what is it we think colleges are doing, right? And what is it that we think that is meant to happen here? So if the basis of affirmative action were reparative rather than diversity, then you can't end up in this sort of rhetorical spin of us all being on the same field, because you have made the argument that these institutions owe a debt and have to do reparative work in order to repay that debt. And that debt is, right, the labor, the land, the multiple centuries or decades of shutout. But for me, it's actually even beyond that, because still what we do in a reparative framework is we go back to those first slides. College makes you rich. We kept Black students from going to college. We have to repair that by letting Black students come in, and then they can get rich. Like, it isn't quite said that way, but that's the framework. For me, it is, the unlikely to be taken opportunity, but nonetheless an opportunity to genuinely ask what it is we think college admissions is about. What does it mean to take 100 students who all have scores, grades, and accomplishments that are, where the variation is genuinely less than one standard deviation. Like this student played the violin in high school for 3 years, whereas this student played the viola for 6 years. Like this is what we're talking about. We are not, and to make decisions between them as though one is more meritorious than the other is bizarre to me. I mean, it genuinely has nothing to do with my experience of students in the classroom. I suspect that if we were to be really super duper honest about why universities really exist, which is that they are this extraordinary possibility of a capitalist system so well advanced that it can allow a certain group of people to just sit around and read books and think about shit. Like that's what it is, right? Like universities are not for students, they're mostly for us, like in the broadest sense. And they exist because we have so much shit. We have made and manufactured and created and sold so much excess value, which we got to, like how do we get all this excess value? Oh, intergenerational chattel bondage. So we have so much excess value that we can take a whole group of people who don't need to make anything. They don't need to make any, what, do you make it? I don't make it. I don't make, like, I don't grow food. I don't make clothing. I don't produce widgets. I don't even make money in the sense of like trading. We just sit around and make ideas. We read books, we make ideas, we advance. And this has happened in many societies before, but we can really do it on large scale. But in order to do it, somebody has to pay that bill. And paying that bill is in part the undergraduates, and some of the graduate students, so we have to create market models where we determine their futures as signaling games so that some portion can sit and think. I mean, we get to a point after 7 years of working our jobs where if we thought really well, we can't even be fired for thinking really crazy things. That is what our jobs are. That is not, my grandmother was cold making shit. It is I mean, I don't know why I didn't tell us about this job. This is the best, craziest, most wild job. If we think about the academy that way, we are less worked up about whether we, with this extraordinary capacity to sit around and think about things, would have to teach a student who maybe got some kind of abysmal score on their SATs. Like that student would be in the class talking with us. It seems to me, actually, maybe that's the more the student we should teach. Like there perhaps should be an actual inversion where students who already know all this shit should not get to go to Ivy Leagues. And only students who didn't get an opportunity to learn all these things should be, like it may be, but it certainly should be worth a conversation as opposed to a presumption that if you had every advantage, you should continue to have every advantage. And that for me would, I think, be the most exciting possible public conversation. Wouldn't be about the reparative requirements of the land-stealing universities to the communities from which they stole land and labor. I mean, that is one conversation. But the most exciting one to me would be, what are we doing? And what are we doing, not like, are we giving them enough skills? How could we give them skills? We don't have jobs. How could I possibly tell you what you need to do at work? I don't have that kind of job. This is the first time I've worn pantyhose in 25 years. I have no idea what people need to do at work. I don't do my hair for, I have no idea what it is you might need to do at work, but we could talk about some ideas. And the idea that like we are training them is maddening. And I would really like to think about what it is we're doing and provide words and value and excitement and enthusiasm, and then maybe an admission process that reflects that. Do I think that's about to happen? I don't. But I also don't think reparations are going to happen, but I'd like to talk about them.
I want to see if we get some students. Oh, got some students up here. So
Oh, yeah, because I was like, you don't deserve to be here because you're 18. Yeah. Yeah,
Just project.
Please, just,
Okay,
yeah.
so I'm a freshman, I'm an international student. I've been throughout my whole life, I'm not first gen, but I've been exposed to higher education in Russia, so I've had kind of a comparison with the American system. I really admired your discussion of higher education as both as an instrument of oppression and like a social elevator, which is this prompted me to ask, what do you think about higher education being more like an instrument of non-marginalized groups enforcing their values and beliefs on those who get admitted? Like, is it worth to really put all of those like sweat and tears and those instruments of like protesting and getting inside this system only to be kind of converged into an agent of non-marginalized groups?
I always want to be in any club that people don't want me to be in. So I think that, especially when we're bright and can see all of the pieces, right, that our critique can end up leaving us where we don't fight for it, right? So the imperfection of American democracy doesn't change the faith that we have in it, right? That's why it's just this question that Professor Rogers gave us that I have not been able to stop asking, right? What is it about democracy that justifies our faith in it? So perhaps the answer is nothing, right? We should not have faith in it. It is not justified, right? But in a similar way, I mean, I see everything that's wrong with American higher ed, from the rooter to the tutor, right? And yet, if they don't want me here, I want to be here. I get why voting is an insufficient tool in a democracy for the expression of preferences, but you ain't gonna keep me from voting, right? So some of that is just being ornery, right? Like, if you don't want me, I want to be here. But it's also, I think, an acknowledgement that there isn't an attempt to police the boundaries of something unless those boundaries hold in them some kind of power or value. This is the you can't take my flag. So I know what the history of the American flag is. I understand the bloodshed, the settler colonialism, the racism over which Old Glory has flown. But it is my flag and you may not have it. Like, you may not run off with it and take it and call it exclusively what you want, right? That is like, that's mine. And I don't have to go find another flag. That one's mine, right? And so I want to pull the folding chair up to the table of this very imperfect, lopsided, unequal table. And I would suggest, because I'm sort of overstating when I say I've never had a job, because I've had a few. And I've had time, like, usually all simultaneously, right? And I do consistently return to the academy in part because, for many reasons, but one is because the nature of hierarchy in the academy, certainly it exists, the elevator, all of that, but it does have a different flavor and characteristic to it. There's patriarchy, there's racism, there's transphobia, there are all the things, but there's also ideas in a way that, when I worked for MSNBC, it was just like, who is in the C-suite is in charge. And they get to be in charge because they're in charge, not because they have the better idea. That's just, and if you challenge it, they literally pull out the what is it, the flow sheet, what is it called, where somebody is in charge of you? Yeah, the org chart. There you see, I don't even know, because the academy, who would my boss be? I don't know, not my chair, clearly, right? So they would pull out the org chart and they'd say, well, Joe said you have to do it, and this is where Joe's little box is over your little box. So if Joe says to do it, and that kind of hierarchy, which doesn't even pretend to be about ideas, is repulsive for me. And I think that is the part that feels like democracy. So when Jefferson writes, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons, I'm cleaning up the gender language, that all persons are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. and that governments are instituted among persons exclusively for the purpose of protecting these rights, and that governments get their ability to govern from consent of the governed, right? There is nothing even vaguely self-evident about that when he writes it, right? So he's writing that on the Monticello Mountain, right? Looking out over hundreds of people who he holds in intergenerational chattel bondage. But he doesn't write that. He writes an like, I am so glad that the Declaration of Independence is an aspirational document rather than a critique of the existing or even an explanation of the existing system. I'm glad that the Declaration of Independence is not notes on the state of Virginia. It's not even the Constitution, because it is that, and then I'll stop, that allows Dr. King to stand and say, there's been a check written to the American people and it's come back, right, with return funds, right? The check has bounced. But if there's no check written, then there's no debt. And so for me, that is the possibility both of American democracy and of the system of higher education, is that the check, the aspiration, the Declaration of Independence is this notion of meritocracy built on the quality of ideas and engagement. And even if it is not in existence, the very notion that that is what we are meant to do gives us a thing against which we can struggle. As opposed to like, no, the org chart says Joe is in charge, then what you gonna do? Because they're not even claiming something else. They're just saying Joe gets to tell you what to do.
So listen, I know there are more hands, but listen, we have a reception right outside. So let's go to the reception and there'll be more time to chat with Professor Harris Perry. But join me in thanking her for an extraordinary engagement.